Hi everybody, my name is Anna Margaret and I'm here with Sabe, and we're going to be working on the pose Padmasana, and in English it's called Lotus Pose. It's a wonderful pose, and in many ways it's a cure-all, but very importantly in an energetic way, it's a posture that we can use to awaken our Kundalini, and of course that will awaken our Shakti. Now for many of us it's a little challenging to come into, so Sabe is willing to work with us today on some modifications and some ways to warm up to come into the final pose. So please join us and have a good time. For the posture, I would maybe, if you can find one or two blankets and perhaps a block or two, and then we'll get started. Okay? So the first thing you're going to do is just sit up, and you're going to bring your feet together in what we know as a Kalber's pose. But today we're going to make it a little bit different, and in Yin Yoga it's called butterfly pose. So instead of having the heels very close to the body, we're going to bring the feet forward a little bit. And for lotus pose, it's very important for us to be able to externally rotate. So this is a wonderful pose to start with. And you can hold on to your feet if you'd like. And then slowly you're going to take your time, and we're going to hold everything between 3 and 5 minutes. So just be patient and hang out. And slowly we're going to start to fold forward, and we're going to find different, what I like to call speed bumps sometimes. So we come to our first little bump in the road, and we hang out there for a little bit longer, and we continue on. And we just take our time, we take a deep breath. The exhales are very conducive in forward bends, so you can use maybe a longer exhale to get a little bit deeper in the pose. And so you'll find that the hips start to open, that the lower back starts to release. And if this is easy for you and you can bring your head to your feet, please feel free to do that. And if that's not as easy for you, we can use a block under our forehead. So let's just show them what that might look like. So you can put like a block on your feet if you'd like, and then fold forward and let your forehead rest on the block for a little time. Now what I found when I'm in poses and I'm holding a little bit longer is that my body starts to release and I can go a little bit deeper. So if you find that you don't need the block at some point, feel free to move the block out of your way. Is that what we're finding? Okay. Right. So Sabe is going to completely surrender here and release. And you want to check in that you're not creating any excess tension in the shoulders or maybe in the jaw or the face. So just be as soft as you can. And what I think of as I'm inviting the pose in rather than me rushing to meet the pose. And whenever we're holding, thoughts start to arise and spiral. So our work in whatever kind of practice we're doing is to be as present as possible. So one technique might be to go back to your breath and observe the soft sound of Ujjayi coming in and coming out. Some of you might have a mantra that you like to work with, so feel free to use that. And for some of us, just having the power to observe the thoughts without being attached to them is a nice way to practice when we're in our asanas. So just another minute or two if you can hang in there. One of the gifts I definitely am very grateful for in my yin practice is that I get to hang out with what's uncomfortable. And that a lot of times leads me to a new place. Sometimes a new place of discomfort, and sometimes a new place of openness and surrender. And we'll just take a few more breaths. Just letting the inhale and especially the exhale perhaps take you a little bit deeper into the posture. Noticing where the energy feels more fixed or where the energy feels more flowing. Please take 3 more breaths. And when you feel complete there, you'll slowly roll up. So take your time, because there's a lot of tissue and muscle that we've been stretching and opening. And so we'll take our time and come up. And then once you have come out of the pose, maybe just sit for a moment and just observe, perhaps with the eyes closed, and just see how you feel. And so we just take a few breaths. And then go ahead and place your hands under your knees and bring the knees together. And if it's appropriate for you, you can rest your hands back. Maybe open the feet a little bit wider. And I think we can probably both do this. And just let the knees drop from side to side. All right. And then we're going to transition up to our hands and knees. And if you have any issues with the knees and you want to kind of cushion your knees, you're welcome to use a blanket or two. Do you think you need one? No? Okay. So go ahead and step your right foot forward. Then you're going to bend the back leg. No, so keep the front knee, and just bend the back knee and grab your back foot. Oh. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So we're just going to stretch the quad a little bit. And this also stretches the hip flexor. And let's say you couldn't reach as easily, you couldn't reach the floor as easily as she's doing. You can use a block under your hand. And if you couldn't reach your foot, you can also use a belt. So just know that there's always options. And my philosophy always in yoga is that the pose should meet you, right? So we're not rushing to meet the pose, or we're not straining to meet the pose. We should also always keep the sense of fluidity and softness around our practice. And we'll take a few more breaths. It took me a while to make friends with this pose, but when I did, it's quite lovely. So we'll just take maybe 4 or 5 more breaths. So whenever I'm trying to warm up for a pose, I don't think of just one part of my body that I have to warm up, but I think about the body as a whole. So all these different places that we would need to work on. And here it's not just the hip flexor, but it's also a nice stretch for the iliopsoas muscle. And it feels good just to kind of sometimes lift out of the pose a little bit as the quadricep stretches. And just take 3 more breaths, please. And when you feel ready, then we'll let go of the foot. It might boomerang, so go slowly. Like a little slingshot, actually. And then we'll change sides. Okay? So we'll bring the left foot forward. We'll bend the back leg and grab hold. And depending on, sometimes it even depends on our shoulders flexibility, whether we hold on the outside or the inside of the foot. And then we become aware of how this side is feeling, because it might be a different experience than the first side. And we keep the breath smooth, we keep our face soft, and we keep our mind focused. And we notice here where the opening is happening, again, where energy might be congested or where it's flowing. Just a few more breaths. And then when you're ready, you're going to slowly release. Nice job. Step your left foot back and just take child's pose for a moment. So let's just take a moment here. I always like to to pause between poses, because it also gives me a chance to understand and feel the results of what I've done. Sometimes if I kind of move too quickly, I lose that connection. And then we'll go ahead and roll up, and please lie down on your back. Yeah, perfect. In Yin Yoga, we call this saddle pose, and we're doing half saddle. So for some of you this might be more familiar as happy baby pose. Okay, but to start with, we're going to place both feet on the floor. So you're going to bend your knees, yeah. And then you're going to bring your right knee in and hold the inside of your right foot. There we go. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and do our best to stack the ankle over the knee. We'll keep this foot just for a little while just on the floor. And this might be where you want to stay today, right? With the left foot on the floor and your right leg in this position. For some of you, it might feel right to stretch the left leg out. So if you want to go ahead and do that. And I always like to give myself permission to change my mind. So sometimes I try something and it's like, no, not today. But if this feels okay, we just keep the leg relaxed. Our yin practice helps us to cultivate patience and awareness, mindfulness, the permission to be present. And as you relax more in the pose, you might find that this leg even drops a little further down or a little further out. So you can kind of play with where you are today. Just another minute or so. And we'll take a few more breaths. And then just for the last few breaths, notice if you're holding any particular or extra tension or tension in the shoulder, and see if you can also just soften that right shoulder a little bit. So sometimes when we're stretching one part, then another part engages a little bit stronger. So part of our practice is to help us be aware of our whole body. And just take about 3 or 4 more breaths here, please. And then after this exhale, we'll release the foot, and now place both feet on the floor again. But this time we'll open the feet a little bit wider and let the knees touch. Right, and we relax here, and you can relax with your arms by your side, or some people like to place their hands on their lower belly. And just take a few breaths. Okay, and let's go to side 2. So half pose. Again, trying to stack the ankle over the knee. And then if you feel like this side might benefit, then you stretch the right leg out. And just be aware that this side might feel a little bit different than the first side. So again, it's about being present to where we are. Some days you might be surprised of where you're open. some days you might be surprised of where it doesn't feel as open. Okay, just a few more breaths here. Keeping a nice steady connection between inhale and exhale. And just about 3 or 4 more breaths on this side. And then when you feel ready, this time you'll bring both knees into the chest. And just take the legs in a little circle to loosen up any last little bits of tension. And we can go in one direction, and she's changed directions. I think she might have done this before. And then you'll go ahead and roll to your right side and slowly sit up. Right, so we have one more warm-up or prep before you see the full lotus. Right? And this is called log pose or double pigeon, depending where we are. And we're just going to stack one leg over the other. So you can see how beautiful and easily she does this. That probably is not going to look or feel the same for everybody. So a couple things that we can do here. Let's say if your knee couldn't touch this bottom foot, you could put a blanket. That would be one option. Or this might be very hard to get the foot over the knee. So another thing we could do, I'll take the blanket back, and we could also put the foot on top of this block. So just know that there's a few ways that we can get into it if it doesn't happen as easily as she did in the beginning. Okay, but so bring your foot back as a log. There we go. And you'll know what you need because there's another part to this. And the other part is to start to come forward, right? So go ahead and walk your hands forward. And you want to keep this top foot somewhat flexed, and that'll take care of your knee. And if you couldn't come down to your arms, you could also use the blocks under your arms. And if you can't get your head to the floor, you could put a block under your forehead. So again, it's how the pose comes to greet you. And this is the closest step now that we're going to get to Padmasana lotus pose. This gives a wonderful stretch to the hips, to the lower back and the whole spine. And I do my best to try and be here between 3 and 5 minutes. But it always depends on where you are that day on the mat. Okay, just a few more breaths. And since we are in this wonderful forward bend, it might help you to come to make the exhales a little bit longer, so you can try that. Last 3 or 4 breaths. And then go ahead and take your time. Come on up, please. If you're ready, you can uncross your legs. Maybe give them a little shake out. Okay, and then we'll try the other side. So there's always the other side. So the opposite leg on top. Again, you can see we're already getting that wonderful external rotation that we'll need for Padmasana. And then we'll take our time and come down. So there's no rush. You take as long as you need to, and maybe some days you stay up higher in the hands, maybe some days you can completely fold forward and reach the ground. See, she keeps her shoulders nice and soft. So sometimes when we come into the four bends, for some reason we tend to tense up the shoulders, so we want to keep the shoulders soft. Want to breathe into the hips and the belly and the pelvic bowl. We'll be here another minute or so. Just the last few breaths, please. And then when you're ready to, please roll yourself up slowly. And then uncross the legs and shake them out a little bit. And now we'll look at the fruits of our practice and try Padmasana, lotus pose. So whenever you're ready, my dear. So you see she's getting her foot up nice and high, right by the crease, the hip crease. And the other leg folds forward. And for some of you, you might stay just with one foot up and the other one folded normally. But if you can, then ta-da, here we are in Padmasana. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy and happy lotus. Om Shanti. Om Shanti.